GC just hired to build an entirely new sport.
Envision goes beyond energy. Envision is empowering the future through NOS. Envision's innovative Internet of Things platform.
As technology moves forward, it gets more and more exciting.
A Formula E race condenses a 1 year in the life cycle for many of our businesses down to 45 minutes. And those 45 minutes of high intensity, high velocity, iterative, repetitive business conditions give us the perfect microcosm to look at and draw some insights that I think applies just as well to the rest of the industry that we represent here today. We're going to unpack that today in the next few minutes. Before I do that, this is Sylvain Philippe. You've already met him by video, and Sylvain is actually Managing Director for the Envision Virgin Racing team. And among other things, he's on the forefront of using and driving AI to deliver performance. My name is Sanjay Srivastav. I'm Chief Digital Officer for Genpact. Many of you will know us for being a large global professional services provider delivering digital transformation for companies. And my teams across the globe are deploying thousands of implementations around artificial intelligence, automation, advanced analytics, and experiential design. And I wanted to kind of bring some of the perspectives from that into the dialogue today. So with that, let's go back to where we started, the Formula E racing and the work that we're doing with Sylvain and his team around that. We think there are three takeaways. There are three really interesting insights that come out of that world that apply to the rest of the industry. And I want to take you through them one by one. So the first large trend line that we see is the world of data. And I am not able to get this moving, but we'll give it one more try. If I can have someone come in and help me with this is not advancing. So let me actually talk about the world of data. I think that's important. So you have to start with data to build artificial intelligence. And there we go, a little bit of delay. Artificial intelligence is founded in data, and without data, there is no AI. And the reality is, when you think about data, 70%, 65 to 75% of all of the enterprise data in the world that exists today is never used in business. In fact, we happen to think that there are two kinds of companies. There's companies that actually are built on a foundation of data, and that's where they started. That's the value proposition. That's what they do every single day. And then there are companies that are built on a value proposition of something else. And they're now changing and embracing and bringing in and building that foundation of data. And that journey of going from reactive, static, reporting approach to data as an asset to a proactive, a predictive, and to use your word, instinctive approach to using data is what separates the winners from the losers. And I'm going to turn to Sylvain and you for a second, because the reality is, in racing, you can't even get started without data. How do you think about it?
Sure. First, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Look, motorsport and Formula E in particular, I think makes a very interesting case study for what we're talking about here, because a lot of companies will talk about data and how you can improve your business using data, and that's very clear. For us, using data is absolutely at the heart of what we do. To give you an idea, if we had a network issue, at a racetrack in a city somewhere. If we could not collect the data from our cars, we couldn't even get the car on the grid. We couldn't even be part of the race. Data is not only just optimizing, but it's the fundamental of what we do. But at the end of the day, you are in motorsport to win, right? So everything we do is to try to find edges to basically be able to win. So we use data in two different ways. The first way is collecting a lot of data from the car, and that's the beauty of motorsport. You generate a lot of data that is really well structured, really well qualified, which gives you the opportunity to do a lot of stuff with, right? So we use all of the data to optimize the car. As we evolve through the day, we have free practice sessions and qualifying, then the race. So we gather more and more data throughout the day. And we use that data to optimize everything that we can do on the car, from the mechanical setup to the way we deploy the energy around the track to many other aspects to make the car simply quicker, right? That's the first aspect. But the second aspect, which is something that we're going to work very closely with Genpact on, is the fact that once you've developed the best possible car and you've tuned it perfectly for whatever track you're on, then you have to win the race, right? And to win the race, as we all know, the beauty of motorsport is that it's very unpredictable. And there are millions of possible scenarios of things that can happen during a race. So we need to use data and use AI to accelerate our understanding of the data so we can formulate the best strategy and basically make the best decisions during the race. Because this is what will win or lose the race, not just having the quickest car. It's not enough.
I think
so that's the main thing. That's something we are going to work together on.
I think that's right, and it's interesting because as much of the work we're doing with you, Sylvain, and the teams who are working closely on this around machine learning and deep learning, the reality is none of that would happen if we can't first build that digital twin, that ability to pull in all of the sensory data into one place, from brakes to engines, from inverters to accelerators to compression to all of the different aspects. And I think having that foundational layer of data is so key in the work we're doing. I wanted to actually contrast that with what we're learning from the industry. Now, we serve a number of Fortune 500 companies across the globe, but I'll pick an example from the manufacturing industry, the aircraft engine manufacturers. And for them, we've been serving them for a number of years now. We basically do predictive maintenance of parts. So we analyze the data streams, all of the 350 sensors that come off of jet engine blades, jet engines that are flying across the globe. And we use that to predict part failures. It's the idea of, if you're going to fly to Singapore, you want the part ordered and ready 17 hours later when you land, and you don't get stuck there for another 3 days. So it's really, really helpful for that industry. But what's really interesting is that data not only solves for that problem, but actually is now changing the industry completely. And as many of you will know, that industry has gone from people that design and manufacture and sell aircraft engines to a completely new industry that designs and manufactures aircraft engines, but actually sells air miles flown. And that transformative power is really what data as a foundation unleashes. So look, the bottom line is really simple. If you want to drive transformative action, we think the number one learning that's on the table is start with a foundation of data. Let's keep moving forward, and I'll go to the second one here. Look, here's the second key insight we've sort of seen equally in the work we're doing with Sylvain and his team, but we see it with the rest of the industry, which is the power of collective intelligence, the power of connected ecosystems. Now, it's obvious, right? Look at the big picture, step away from the problem within the confines of how you see it, and think about ecosystems that sit around it and surround it and bring them into the picture. And that's not just data. Of course, data is a large part of it, but that's domain knowledge, that's process understanding, that is all of the interactions and interfaces between these ecosystems that drive that. But when you look at that collective intelligence that sits within those connected ecosystems, and you're able to use AI to drive and derive insights that result in precision adjustments you can make, that's what separates winners from losers. And so we'll want to actually unpack that a little bit, and we'll start with Virgin Racing first. And so Sylvain, you're connecting so many different ecosystems. Why, and how's that helping?
Yeah, I think the short answer to that is to deep dive a bit on how we achieve performance, right? So collecting this data and analyzing it gives us an idea on what we need to do to make the car go faster. But the reality is that there are so many aspects of it. You have the mechanical setup part of the car, you have the energy management, you have the simulation. So by gathering much more data, and analyzing a lot more data, which is what AI will allow us to do, we get basically more ideas flowing to the respective teams. But at the end of the day, what's interesting is that just analyzing more data and getting more insights is not enough. It's what you do with it. And what's interesting is that, like many of the companies, but I think we're a good example, you have a lot of specialist people with very specific knowledge that are the experts at what they do. But for me, at the end of the day, what's important is the bigger picture to decide what we do with it. So the simulation guys might have got some ideas, but it needs to relate really well to what the chassis engineers are doing to make sure that it will translate into something real world. So to me, it's down to communication. And this is where AI can help by triggering more ideas, but each and individual team need to work very well together to deliver an actual output. And motorsport is a great example because it's a very visible thing, right? If you fail, it's very visible. If you win, it's very visible. There's no hiding. So that's why to get into pretty interesting, I think.
That is super interesting, and I'll just kind of double click on that a little bit. I had a chance to review with the team the work they're doing with your group. And I just picked two of the ecosystems. I picked the ecosystem of the car itself and all the sensor and the information we're getting off of that. And then the ecosystem of the audience, your fan base, the people that are actually tracking it. And it's interesting as I learn more about Formula E racing, the interaction of those two ecosystems and using fan boost and kind of the audience participation as an ability to get 5% more energy boost in a race, right? And that can drive the difference between winning and losing. And it was really interesting to see that, you know, there's a direct example in racing of how at least those two ecosystems, and there are examples of many other ecosystems come together. I do want to sort of actually turn from that to, I think, what we see in the industry. And the reality is connected ecosystems is the core for some of the successes we're driving with clients today. And I'll just take one example from the consumer products goods industries. We serve most of the top companies in that space. And some of the work we do with them is around the idea of matching demand with supply. Now, it sounds like an easy problem. It's a really hard problem, as we all know, partly because in that business, you cannot just look at warehousing and inventory information, the information that sits within our client's firewall or four walls. You've got to actually extend and look at the bigger picture. You look at competitors, you look at consumer needs, you look at macroeconomic conditions, you look at shipping, logistics, weather patterns. When you pull all of that together into a connected ecosystem, and then when you actually apply AI to figure out the weak patterns and the strong models, both, to really uncover the insights that allow you to drive performance. And we're finding that in supply chain, in meeting demand and supply, you can't even get started unless you think about connected ecosystems. And so for us, you know, the big takeaway is very simple, and we work with clients across the globe on this. The number one advice is find a way to connect your ecosystems and then use AI. Use artificial intelligence as the neural wiring that can do natural language processing, that can do computer vision, it can apply conversational threading, and then ultimately deep learning and knowledge microservices. When you use AI as the neural wiring, you now have the ability to harvest the collective intelligence that sits in those connected ecosystems and bring them to play, and that's the difference between winning and losing. Fair enough. Let's go to our third key insight that comes through, and that is in the world of building purpose-driven enterprises. And I think this is fascinating. I'll tell you, this is the number one question when I work with boards across the world that I get from boards, and it's the number one question that we end up with after a session with the board. And that is, how do you use AI to build purpose-driven enterprises, to build purpose-driven teams? Now, this is really interesting because artificial intelligence is a change in computing paradigm. I mean, we've heard it most of the day today and yesterday. And what it does is it allows us not only to solve for the problems of yesterday that we need to solve today, but actually anticipate and address problems that are going to come up tomorrow. Many of those decisions we don't even know we need to make today, that we'll need to make tomorrow. And the reason it does that is because it's an adaptive system, it's responsive, it's learning as it's going along, and it's taking those learnings and finding it back in. And this ability to use AI to solve a problem and win on a project and translate that to a company winning, which then goes to an industry transforming, which goes to a world that gets better and ultimately affects the human condition, is a really important concept that AI is able to deliver. Now, I've set this up in a way because I want to turn to Sylvain in a second. I want to say, Sylvain, I know this is about winning the race, but is it? And what's beyond that?
Yeah, this is a good point, you're right. And I think it's probably the most important point. You know, going back 5 years, the reason why we started this team was not just to go around in circles and having fun doing it, even though it's legitimate, but it's a much bigger thing than that. What we are trying to achieve simply is to accelerate the transition to a renewable and sustainable mobility. And we all live in cities, we all know the issues that we face of congestion, pollution, and all the things that don't work. And then on the bigger picture, we have a slight climate change problem, right? It's in the news a lot at the moment. So our role in trying to solve that problem is to accelerate the transition to electric vehicle mobility, simply because it is a fact now, it will solve many issues that we have in our everyday lives. So our small part and our small play in this is to use motorsport as a platform to do two things. The first thing is to develop amazing technologies, and that's the beauty we have in motorsport. We can develop this incredible cutting-edge technology, and you can see on the race car here, and then I invite you to watch races. We develop this incredible lightweight, super efficient, extremely high-performance electric powertrains. But not just for the sake of developing a great race car. The idea is that all our partners, suppliers, car manufacturers we work with are then using that knowledge and learning very fast to apply these technologies to the road cars all of you guys are going to buy in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. That's the main thing. The second pillar is marketing and communication, and we are actually not reinventing the wheel here, pardon the pun. We are using motorsport for what it's really good at, which is a fantastic media and marketing platform. And you might not realize it, but if you watch a race, which I invite you to do next weekend and for the next 6 months, for 45 minutes, you're watching an electric car going at 120 to 150 miles an hour non-stop for 45 minutes. Your subconscious will realize, this car can do that, it's surely good enough to do my school run and my grocery shop and all these things. And slowly, over time, it will really change perception on electric vehicles and make people realize, these cars can do that. So to finalize, our job and my job is not just developing these technologies and this fantastic race team to win, it's to make sure that we accelerate that adoption. And this is what AI will do, because I am convinced that starting to use AI into data analysis means by definition we are going to generate more insights, better insights, which is going to accelerate our learning. And then every year, we are starting from scratch. Every year we build a brand new race car, which means we can really make big steps into improving that technology. And I think, it's hard to measure, but for sure in 5 years' time, when all of you will have the opportunity to buy amazing electric cars, some of the reason why these cars are there will be because of what we've been doing.
That's such an inspiring purpose that I think you're striving for. And by the way, I can see that reflected in the voice and the eyes of our team that's working with you. By the way, some of them are actually here at the show. They'll be at our booth. So come on in and engage with us and with them, and you'll walk away with some very interesting insights. I tell you that purpose-driven enterprise is such an important thing, and I can see that reflected internally with our teams, and I can see that across the industry. And I just want to bring that to light with an example outside of racing, so we'll expand this to the industry in a second. Some of the customers we serve in the world are some of the largest pharmaceutical companies across the globe, and we've been working with them for years now, but one of the things we do for them is pharmaceutical co-vigilance. And that's the world of understanding adverse events and being able to report and comply with regulatory laws across the globe. These are regulations that are different for different countries. They're changing all of the time. Obviously, adverse events are going up, so this is a large-scale problem. And we use artificial intelligence, we use language processing, we use extraction, we use classification capabilities, we automatically compile this and are able to file for reporting. And the idea of doing that really started with the idea of being responsive, being able to cut down the time it takes, being efficient in the way we do this and our clients do this in serving their customers and the regulators around the world. But what is really interesting is that work has gone on. We now are building an ontology, a federated machine learning model, the capability, if you will, at large to be able to track in real time dynamic drug safety issues and be able to get a grip on that information as it's happening and respond to that. And if you will, that points to the larger goal, the ability to think about public safety and to address drug safety at large in real time. And so it's a great example, I thought, in the industry of how a specific project born out of an immediate need and yet contributing to a much higher level purpose. And that is the transformative power of AI. And it comes because AI can help drive purpose-driven organizations and enterprises by being the neural wiring that makes that happen. So with that, let me pull this back. Look, we started with the high-paced, fast velocity, highly intense, repetitive, iterative learning cycles, right? Sylvain was telling me earlier today at breakfast that he releases a software code every 2 weeks for every race. And so you just think about the level of intensity that goes into that. And there are 3 key takeaways that I'd leave with you as I would leave with any one of your boards today. Number 1, start with data as a foundation. Number 2, think about collective intelligence and harvesting them from connected ecosystems. And number 3, build purpose-driven enterprises on the back of artificial intelligence. And that, in our minds, is the key between winning and losing. Now, we have a couple of minutes left. I'd like to, both of us would like to take a couple of questions. We're also going to be around in the breakup, in the break, and we're going to be at our booth. So please come on by to engage. But for now, let's take a couple of questions. I believe there are microphones somewhere in the room. If you have a question, just throw your hand up. We'll start with you. Okay. Yes. Okay, back in here. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I didn't get
How did the human element play in the equation? What are we doing with drivers inside the race car and enabling and augmenting them with AI capabilities?
It's a very good point. It's back to what we're talking about ecosystems, right? So at the end of the day, there's a human being, the driver driving this car, and he's the one making the difference between winning and losing. However, he's not able to do that alone. And if he was left alone on the track, for sure he would not win. So we have so many insights and data and strategy to feed back to the driver. But what's interesting is that as we generate much more data and analyze it, it becomes more and more complex. And at some point, the human brain has a limit of how much data it can absorb and process and make decisions. So our job, in a way, it's quite strange, is that everything's getting more and more complex and we are making correct decisions, but then we have to simplify the outcome for the driver to be able to understand it and react on it. So it's a strange chain of huge amount of data, analyzing, and then simplifying again so it turns into an outcome, right? And that sounds really... It's basically a lot harder to do than it is to say, but
yeah. And I just add to that, look, Silva, I mean, I think broadly even in the industry, I think we see this problem at large. AI is solving for many problems, but adoption is a key component of making it usable. And we think experiential design, the notion of journey mapping, understanding how the human interacts with it and making it more absorbable, making it more explainable, which is a large driver of adoption, if you will, on the curve, and driving some of those components as equally important, and I think you rightfully asked the question, as is the core AI technology itself. So fantastic question. Thank you for that. Yes, sir.
Sure. Getting a bit more specific. So during the race, as I said, you've done everything you could to make the car go faster in terms of setup, energy management, all your simulation has been done and all that. During the race, it's a very different set of problems, but it's how do you adapt and react to what's happening on track? And as I said, there are millions of possibilities, from a clean race where nothing happens, which never happens, to many problems, accidents, changing positions and whatever. So depending on where you are on the track, whether you're leading in the middle or at the back, depending on whether there's a safety car or not, depending on so many different incidents, then our job is all about making always the perfect reaction at the right time. And what I think is an interesting case study in what we are doing is that many companies generate and gather and analyze terabytes of data. That happens all the time. But what is very unique in what we do is the speed at which we need to do it. So we don't necessarily analyze the biggest amount of data out there, of course we don't, but the data comes from so many different channels, from video, audio, live telemetry, car data, feedback directly from the driver in the radio, and so on. And our job is to consolidate all of that data into an intelligible way, and then make decisions literally second by second. If we are running at the front, but then there's a safety car happening, we need to react instantly and decide what we do at that point. We don't have a minute or even 30 seconds to think about it. We have 1 or 2 seconds. So the only way we can do that is by using AI to do super fast simulation exercises that basically tell us what to do. And believe me, it's never perfect. I'm not saying we do that perfectly. We do that much better than we used to, but this is one of these never-ending jobs where, the more experience we have, the better the algorithm, the better decisions we'll make.
The other example I saw in the work that I think we're doing around this and back to the preparation for the races in the 12 downtown locations, I mean, we have a visual 3D map of, let's just say, a manhole cover that's on the street. And how do you take that and represent that on a simulation such that when the driver is actually practicing, he or she feels the bumps on that curve when they hit that, and they can practice around that. And all of that is happening on the back of artificial intelligence, taking this piece of data, converting it and translating into sensory reaction that you're going to feel through the steering wheel, and then be able to practice around that. So that's one example. We see many examples of that in the industry. Clint, I think we're up for time.
We are unfortunately out of time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.